with that headline would come away with the impression that it's dangerous if they said it almost killed me. But anyway, I'll move on to the broader conversation that Mr. McGovern was having. Previously, I certainly share his sentiments. He took most of the questions I was going to ask of Mr. Gaetz. To the extent that, Mr. Gaetz, you'd like to expound upon well, let me say it this way. Earlier, I don't know if you were here, Mr. Massey and I had an exchange, and he had a thoughtful retort to my use of the word engineered, that the Republican conference had engineered a shutdown, and as a very competent engineer himself, he took issue with that description. But you've been very clear that these failures lay at the feet of the Republican leadership in the House, and it seems to me as though the Speaker and the Republican leadership clearly wanted a shutdown, because I think if the American people...
No, I think they wanted a CR.
If the American people looked at the facts and said, looked at the situation, the contextual situation, and said, okay, you've got a Republican leadership that refuses to bring a single, well, I guess about one, but the vast majority of these single subject spending bills to the floor. You've got a Republican leadership that refuses to bring a CR to the floor. In what world is that not a situation designed for maximal chaos and dysfunction?
No, they wanted to bring a CR. I think our leadership wanted to revert to the ineffective muscle memory that we'd all like to be liberated from. I think they wanted to have a short-term CR, and then a long-term CR, and then an omnibus. And I think that's what they want to do, because these very people have fought for that path during the 7 years I've been here in Congress, in one form or another, and in one party or another, no matter which party's occupied the Speaker's office. They didn't have the votes for the CR, is the reason that we're choosing this path instead. So I think it's a better path. It seems consistent with our broader goals. And you're right that there have been failures in our leadership, and it will, when we get through these bills, which are obviously our priority now, given the truncated time period that the ranking member noted, we're going to have to make some choices about our leadership. We're going to have to deal with their failures. And there seems to be universal agreement here that there's no logical explanation for not having done the work that the Congress used to do back in the 90s, other than the desire to centralize power with a few people, have a backroom deal, and then everybody else has to vote up or down on funding the whole government, which we can be liberated from. I want to give you hope that in state legislatures all over this country, there are individual single-subject spending bills that move forward, and sometimes they pass, sometimes they fail, sometimes they've got to be brought up again. Oftentimes, Republicans and Democrats have to compromise, have to take half a loaf, and at the end of the day, their budget's balanced, and they don't end up trillions of dollars in debt. So I favor the model that we've seen work around the country. And indeed, we may need new and better leadership in order to be compliant with the calendar going forward.
So I want to talk a bit about the timeline, I guess. And it goes back to the point that Ranking McGovern referenced. Republicans and Republican leadership has recessed the House for the weekend, so no one's here. I mean, we're here, of course, but we're not taking up any of these bills. The earliest any of these bills will be taken up will be, today's Friday, earliest will be next Wednesday. So you presuppose, and really it's actually going to be a question for Mr. Rosendale, because I think we're candid in your kind of articulation as to how you view shutdowns and the pain of a shutdown. The notion that these bills will all be passed, all 12, by the House, that the Senate, and of course there are deep disagreements, both with the Senate Democratic Caucus and the Senate Republicans as well, in terms of the bills that Republicans have authored in the House. The notion that the Senate will then accept those, or that they'll be able to be reconciled, right? And then the president signs those into law, all by a week from tomorrow, is clearly not realistic, right? And I think you'd agree with me on that front. I don't know, right? Okay, so operating on that same set of facts. So then, clearly that means the government's going to shut down. And the part I don't understand is why not, maybe actually I'll come back to you in a minute, Mr. Rosendale, Mr. Biggs, why not do a short-term CR that enables you to have the debate that we are having right now for an interim period of time?
Define short-term. You can't. You can't define short-term because no one knows what that looks like. Because we've done short-termers in the past. Last year, how many did we do before we got the Omni? We did at least 2 CRs before we got the Omni. And I think you came in when I did. Maybe,
I did. Yeah.
So that's all we've ever really seen.
So let me pose the question
so-
to you then.
so-
How long are you willing to go?
I'm going to tell you that back to what I was explaining before. When there's an exit point from a suboptimal path, why do people not take it? This is a chance to actually exit the suboptimal path that we've been on. And we get the choice. We get the choice. The whole body gets to choose. We get to say, doggone it, we're going to keep going on this path. And we know that it's going to actually inure to do it again next year and the year following. And so when you say, well, why don't we do it for a week? Well, because you wouldn't say that we could get everything done in 2 weeks, would you?
Well, I guess here's the question. What do you tell the Border Patrol officer in the Yuma sector when he says, I'm not getting paid next week and I still have to work? You tell him, well, it's this political theory of optimalization as to whether political leaders make the right choice, and so therefore we've got to have short-term pain. Do you tell him, as Mr. Rosendale said, that it's a ruse and none of this is real? I don't understand. A week from now, people are going to stop getting paid.
So what do I tell the Border Patrol guys who say to me, Andy, this administration has emasculated everything we can do. What will you do? And I get the privilege of saying, well, we can either continue that on with a CR, where we keep the policies in place and the spending in place, and we get emasculated with 20,000 people crossing the border in about 5 days. And they say to me, I'm quitting anyway. I'm quitting anyway because I'm not getting, because you're not paying me overtime.
Sure.
And for 7 years, Biggs, you've been trying to get us overtime, and what's happened? Well, the Democrats have shut that down every time.
And I'm not disagreeing with you about the overtime. I guess what I'm saying is, why wouldn't you say to them that you're...
So are you...
I'm asking you,
Okay.
Why wouldn't you say, I'm working on it, I'm here in Washington on a Friday trying to get this done, we're negotiating, and I'm going to make sure you don't miss a paycheck as I work to change the policies that you believe that they disagree with. I don't understand why that is not on the table. That's all I'm asking.
Well, so here's my question for you. If we are, you're not going to get all 12 out by next week. Are you going to get DOD out? Are you going to get Homeland?
I'm asking you. You're in charge. I have no idea if you're going to get these out. The Republicans run the House.
Then how can you say you're not going to get them out? That's absurd to say on one hand you're not going to get them out, and then when I say, well, we're going to get these 2 out, and say I have no idea. You have to be consistent, and I think the consistency would be.
Can you help me understand that part? I'm not understanding what.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is where you're inconsistent is to say you're saying you cannot get these bills out.
I have no idea whether you can or not. I'm not.
Well, that's not what you
in charge of the
said.
House. I'm saying that it seems unlikely that the Republicans are going to get out any spending bills since they've only gotten out one in the last 9 months. I have no idea. More rules went down last week than have gone down in the last 20 years. The Republicans control the House. You are in charge. As to whether or not the odds of you getting 12 spending bills out of the House and then also getting into an agreement with a Democratic-controlled Senate and a Democratic president, that seems unlikely. That's my point. And so why, given that uncertainty, why take the risk of Border Patrol agents or members of our armed forces or others going unpaid for any period of time?
Well, that's why we're moving the DOD and the DHS bill. I mean, we didn't pick these bills out of a hat, Mr. Neguse. We chose these bills because we're deeply concerned about those very things. And so probably what I'd tell that Border Patrol agent is to call their 2 Arizona senators and tell them to pick up our DHS bill. If they don't like what we've put together, pass a different version, and let's get to the business of negotiating it.
And and again, the point being, precisely, Mr. Gaetz, in that interim period, why not have a CR so that you can enable the negotiations? That's my point.
Maybe it's the lack of CR that enables the negotiations better. Because what I've seen is the.
I hear you, and
okay.
and I appreciate your honest answer, and I think that's the point, right? And that's the the policy disagreement, or maybe not policy, but it's a strategic question and strategic disagreement that we clearly have. Because I don't think that, in my view, and I understand folks have different opinions, I don't think that's an acceptable answer for the vast majority of people who will be impacted in a negative way by the government shutting down. And that's my view.
Can I clarify just something?
Sure,
If
Ms.
you may-
Marks.
If I just wanted to kind of point out, that I do think, you still guys can support border security and, and that commission and move forward. But even just to clear a record, actually, only non-essential services are affected, and essential services like border security and social security, mandatory, but people still will get in checks and everything else. The challenge is going to be, no, it is.
I agree, but they'll be working without a
the
paycheck.
challenge is going to be when you have an opposite party administration, they will make it painful, right? They will shut down the parks and other things to make it painful. So it is definitely a risk that administration will decide to make it painful, right? Not necessarily, I understand that, right? Because it's not going to affect national security. All issues that affect national security and essential services still will be paid. Social security check and Medicare still will be paid. All mandatory spending will be paid regardless what it is, right? So non-essential services, but administration do this pay, right? So I'm saying, okay, it's up to you guys. You try to figure out maybe we can make it work and get these authorizations, appropriations through, or maybe you can work with us and secure the border, and you support our Secure Border and Debt Commission. We can move it forward. And that's something you guys might need to do too, because we have some people, they have a very strong convictions, and I very respect these convictions too.
I appreciate your point, Mrs. Sparks, and the only thing I would say, just to clarify a technical matter, the essential workers does not mean that they necessarily get paid. They will get back pay. They are just simply not maybe. Yeah, someone point out that because that's an open question. But the point is, you will have individuals, the individuals I mentioned, so Border Patrol officers, for example, that was what Mr. Cuellar was explaining. The Border Patrol officers in his district, if the government funding runs out a week from tomorrow, they will have to continue working without a paycheck. And so the notion that they'll be able to pay their mortgages.
Paycheck doesn't come on October
2
2nd,
weeks,
though.
correct.
Right,
You're right.
So when you,
October
but let's be
13th,
honest then
but-
about the calendar.
But that's an important clarification. I just want to, for the record, to your point, Ms. Sparks, I understand your position more broadly, and so I hear you.
I don't think it's going to be a national security crisis, but I think it's going to be inconvenience in this. We'll still be fine with security, but I think we should do a better job. And maybe a good lesson for all of us, for both parties, we should go through normal processes in appropriations, how that it meant to be in this Congress.
Yeah, I with respect to that last point about going through normal appropriations processes, couldn't agree more. And as you probably heard from my questioning of some of the witnesses previously, wish that Republicans would have started this much, much sooner so that we wouldn't be 7 days away from a shutdown. But Ms. Boebert, of course.
Thank you, Mr. Neguse. With all of this, of course, this administration is going to make a shutdown as painful as possible. We've already heard that the president is willing to fund Ukraine, but not certain parts of our federal government, will not pause funding for Ukraine. That's what's been reported in some areas. And I understand the tactics of my colleagues on the other side to really allow that pain to set in by pulling on the heartstrings of the American people and saying, oh, look at how awful they're being to you because they want process and they want you to hurt and they want you to feel this. Well, if you are concerned with the paychecks of our Border Patrol agents and alike, if you are truly concerned and you are putting that on us for a potential possible short-time shutdown, my question to you is, are you willing to vote in favor of our Homeland Security bill that does provide our Border Patrol agents with a paycheck? Are you willing to vote no to end their paycheck, or would you come on board and support that and help us get this funding in place to ensure that they're able to afford the things that they're hurting from the high inflation, by the reckless spending in Washington, D.C., by the lack of energy security and independence?
I've given you
Yes,
ample
sir.
time, so I
Yes,
want to
sir.
reclaim my time. So a couple of things I would say. First off, we have to dispense with this notion that a government shutdown isn't painful. I don't understand. We've sort of evolved here. Mr. Cole, the chairman, has made very clear on many, many occasions in this committee, he doesn't believe shutdowns are in the best interest of the country. They are painful. They cost the American economy. In 2019, the last time there was a shutdown, of course, as Mr. Biggs mentioned, we both came into the Congress at that time, it cost the American economy $11 billion. The notion that we're now debating the fine details as to whether or not members of our armed forces or Border Patrol officers are going to actually get paychecks down the road a month from now, 2 months from now, or what date the paycheck comes in, and so therefore they can find a way to make things work in the interim is insanity. And the part that I suppose is most frustrating for me is to hear individuals say, we don't want to shut down. We don't want to shut down. But we've done nothing to fund government, and we're 8 days away from a shutdown, and we won't pass a stopgap measure to make sure that any of these consequences that I've identified are ameliorated. With respect to the specific question that my colleague from Colorado posed, the Senate has engaged in a bipartisan process to approve appropriation bills. The vast majority of their bills have come out of committee on a bipartisan basis. There's been an opportunity for Republican senators and Democratic senators to work together, come together, and pass a series of bills. That has not happened in the House. Each of these bills, unlike the past, and obviously we have a number of appropriators here who've served for many years, who I'm sure have some thoughts and can opine on this as well. That has not been the process in the House. But regardless, the broader point remains. No one here believes it's realistic that the Senate and the House, if House Republicans are able to pass out these partisan spending bills before, notwithstanding sending everyone home for the weekend and not taking them up until next Wednesday. But if, I will in a moment, Mr. Biggs, I always enjoy hearing from Mr. Biggs. But assuming that that is even the case, there's no argument that that is actually going to happen. And so what I have been trying to kind of glean from my colleagues here, and I appreciate them being here on a Friday afternoon testifying in front of this committee, all I'm trying to glean is a sense as to whether or not they would be supportive of taking the steps necessary to ensure that as they are making their case, Mr. Biggs, you have a certain view as to how border policy should be executed and the budgetary priorities. That's reflected in this bill that you brought to the committee, I suspect, or maybe, I don't know if you're voting for it or not, but seems like it. And the Senate has a view, and the President has a view, and as those views get reconciled, let's just make sure that Border Patrol officers and members of our armed forces and so many others don't end up getting, bearing the brunt of the damage while politicians in Washington debate it. And so that was my point, but I think we've traversed that ground quite a bit. At the risk of giving Mr. Biggs an opportunity to give the last word, I'm happy to yield to you for a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Neguse. And I'm not trying to churn it up. I'm just trying to, I did think that the question that was asked was actually salient, because I think Mr. McGovern asked us all, put us on the spot, which is fine. I think that's fair. You've been put on the spot, and you didn't answer the question.
With respect to the question that you posed about the Homeland Security bill, I don't know if you heard earlier the questions that I posed to Mr. Joyce about the various disagreements.
I was here.
So the fact that, we can have a debate, and I suspect this is going to happen on the floor. Yeah. Well, I don't know if we're going to have it. I guess it presupposes that the rule is going to pass, which Republicans haven't had much success at in the last few weeks. But presupposing that that is the case, and we have an opportunity to debate the bill, I think you're going to find a very robust debate along the lines of the debate that Mr. Roy and Mr. Cuellar had, which I actually thought was very informative and helpful. And so, yeah, I have issues with this bill. The fact that it doesn't include the $691 million that Mr. Cuellar fought to try to get into the bill for drug interdiction in CBP, I think is a problem. There are a variety of other problems, particularly as it relates to FEMA disaster funding, which is a big issue in my district, which continues to recover from a series of devastating wildfires. So, yes, the point that I was making earlier is that unlike the Senate, we haven't had the opportunity for a bipartisan discussion and negotiation about this appropriation bill. It's essentially been take it or leave it. And so you can assume the answer that you're going to get from many of my colleagues on our side of the aisle, given the product. But that's, again, that's a debate we'll have about the merits of
I
the
look
bill
forward to that
on the
colloquy.
floor.
That'd be fun.
As do I. I'm going to yield back because I know I appreciate the chairman's generosity and with respect to the time. Thank you.
Yep. I think the lady from Minnesota